All right, so you want to dive into this whole Apple versus Samsung thing, huh? Buckle up, because
Yeah.
this research paper you sent us, this goes way past, like, who copied whose design. This is getting intense.
Yeah, this is like full-on corporate chess using lawsuits and patents to control like entire markets, and it all goes back to like 2011, right?
Yeah.
Right when smartphones were blowing up everywhere.
Okay, so it's 2011. Everyone wants the latest phone, and you've got these two companies, Apple and Samsung, duking it out for dominance. And this paper is arguing they were already on their way to like a duopoly.
Yeah, by
Right.
December 2016, they controlled a ridiculous like over 78% of the premium phone market. But get this, it's the profit split that's really wild. Apple and Samsung took home a mind-blowing 91.6% of global smartphone profits in just like Q2 of 2016. We're talking billions and billions of dollars.
Talk about a high-stakes game. So this paper goes deep on how they pulled it off, right? Using game theory to break down these legal battles, it becomes less about winning in court and more about, like, shaping the whole playing field. You know what I mean?
Exactly. They call it the building a case game. Like, think
Yeah.
about it stockpiling weapons before a war even starts. Apple and Samsung, they poured tons of money into being ready to sue each other, even if they weren't, like, actively infringing on patents yet.
So they're both walking around with these loaded legal guns, just waiting for the other one to blink.
Exactly. It's prisoner's dilemma, but, like, corporate edition.
You said this in because it gets nuanced, though, right? It's not just basic prisoner's dilemma. This paper uses this modified model, factors in the long game, you know?
Mm.
Like, how do these lawsuits affect things like a company's brand down the line or future market share? Which makes sense. This was about way more than just some patent here or there. This was about the future of smartphones, period.
Absolutely. And what the researchers found is that just having that legal arsenal ready to go, that gave companies a huge advantage.
So even just the threat of a lawsuit, that was a powerful tool.
Big time. Think of it like this. If Apple sues and Samsung hasn't prepared, they're screwed, scrambling to catch up. This whole being proactive legally, especially on Apple's part, it was calculated to stop anyone from copying and establish them as top dog.
3D chess with patents while everyone else is playing checkers.
Hmm.
But, okay, having the option to sue, that's one thing. When did they actually pull the trigger and why?
That's where this infringing or not infringing game comes in, and trust me, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so spill the tea. Why would they choose to infringe on each other's patents? That seems like shooting yourself in the foot.
See, that's what's so cool about this paper. Sometimes infringing, even though you might get sued for it, it was the smarter move strategically.
How so?
Okay, so remember back then, the smartphone market, it was like the Wild West. Everything was brand new features were changing constantly.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days. Every other week, there was some new thing you just had to have in a phone.
Exactly. So you're Apple or Samsung, you have a choice. Play it safe, respect every single patent, but risk getting left behind in this crazy innovation race,
Or
Yeah.
you sneak in a really, really good idea,
Yeah.
knowing you might get slapped with a lawsuit later.
Bingo. The researchers, they actually built this whole payoff matrix, based on real data from that time. And what it showed was that just from a numbers standpoint, both companies were often better off risking infringement to stay ahead of the game.
High risk, high reward kind of thing. So give me an example. Does the paper give any specifics about how this played out in the real world?
Yeah, so one thing they talk about is the whole evolution of touchscreens. Both companies were really pushing the limits of what was possible. Sometimes they'd add features that were like this close to something the other one had a patent on.
And it's that back and forth, that whole I'm going to copy you, you're going to copy me thing that led to smartphones as we know them today.
The paper argues that, yeah, that's a huge part of it. Now, obviously, it wasn't just like a free-for-all of lawsuits all the time. There's this other phase, the researchers call it the forgiving trigger strategy.
Forgiving trigger. Sounds kind of passive-aggressive, like they're frenemies or something. What's that all about?
Right. So basically, both Apple and Samsung, they fell into this pattern. They'd fight back against infringement for a bit, right? Lawsuits back and forth. But then even if some of the copying was still going on, they'd back off, go back to a sort of truce.
So it was like, sue, back off, sue, back off. Was there like a signal they were looking for or something? Like, okay, they've learned their lesson this time.
What the researchers think is that this pattern, the whole forgiving trigger thing, it actually helped keep some balance in the market. It let them have this super intense competition, even some copying, but within certain boundaries,
So it wasn't just about winning one lawsuit. It was about controlling the whole game, playing the long game.
Exactly. And that brings us to what might be the most surprising part of this whole paper. The researchers argue that these lawsuits, They weren't really about the money from the settlements.
We what? But they were suing for millions.
Yeah, the money was there, but the paper's saying it was secondary. What they were really after were these bigger strategic objectives. And once you see what those were, it completely changes how you see those headlines about Apple and Samsung suing each other.
Okay, you're killing me here. What were these top secret strategic objectives? Don't leave me hanging.
Well, one of them was all about something called customer lifetime value, or CLV.
CLV, right? Like how much profit a company can squeeze out of each customer over time. It's not just selling you one phone, it's making sure you keep coming back for the next one and the next one.
You got it. And this paper, it argues that those lawsuits, even though they were about patents and tech, they actually had a huge impact on pricing and because of that CLV.
Because if they can keep each other from like undercutting each other's prices, it keeps those profit margins nice and high.
Exactly. They even cite this study that found that after Apple won this one specific lawsuit back in 2012, they were able to raise the price of the iPhone without anyone really batting an eye.
Wow, so a win in court equals more money in their pocket per customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good incentive to keep those legal battles going.
For sure. And it shows how connected all these different parts of the business really are. But CLV, that was just one piece of the puzzle. The paper also says there was another, maybe even more ambitious objective, grabbing market share, especially in newer markets.
To places where millions of people are getting their hands on smartphones for the first time. Whoever wins them over, they're set for years, maybe decades.
Right. And get this, the researchers actually found a pattern where Apple and Samsung were filing these lawsuits. It wasn't random.
They were targeting certain countries, playing offense and defense on a global scale. Okay, now you have to give me the details.
They were. Like, the paper talks about a bunch of high-profile lawsuits that were filed in countries where smartphone use was just starting to explode.
So by tying their competitors up in court in these key early stages, they could kind of like influence how the whole market would develop.
That's the idea. It's about stacking the deck in their favor, even if they have to bend the rules a bit. And then there's this third objective the paper talks about, and this one's especially interesting when it comes to Apple.
Okay, so we've got CLV, we've got this whole land grab for new markets. What's his third objective that's so Apple-y?
This one's about sending a message. The paper says Apple was trying to build this reputation like, mess with us and we will come after you. They wanted everyone to know they'd fight tooth and nail for their patents.
Like the honey badger of tech. You come at them, you're going to get stung?
Exactly. They even quote this Apple press release from like 2012. We make these products to delight our customers, not for our competitors to rip off.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
But if that message was so important, why not go straight to the source? If everyone's copying Google, why not sue them directly?
$1 million question, right? And the paper actually spends a lot of time trying to figure that one out.
Well, don't leave us hanging. What'd they come up with?
A few things. One, Google probably had them outgunned legally. By then, they'd bought up Motorola and a ton of other companies. They had a massive patent arsenal.
So going after them in court would be suicide.
Pretty much. But it wasn't just the patents. The paper also says Apple might have been worried about their image. What if they went after Google and lost?
Interesting. So picking a fight with, like, the golden child of Silicon Valley that could backfire, especially with the public.
Exactly. Apple was the cool innovator. Losing a huge patent case against Google could really hurt their image, especially here where everyone loves Google.
Total PR nightmare. But there's one more thing, right? Didn't Apple rely on Google back then for, like, Google Maps and stuff?
Exactly. Suing a company while you're using their stuff. Awkward. The paper says that would have been a huge conflict of interest. Could have even messed up Apple's own products.
So suing Samsung, even though they are tough,
Yeah.
it was less risky than taking on Google head-on.
Yeah.
It was all about strategy.
100%. And even though things between Apple and Samsung have cooled down a bit this paper, it basically says these patent wars are here to stay. In fact, they think we're going to see even more of this in the future, just in different places.
Makes sense. We're talking about China, India, and Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Huge population just getting into smartphones. Whoever wins them over.
Controls a huge chunk of the future of tech. And the researchers think companies are going to keep using the same playbook, strategic copying, aggressive lawsuits, and really smart PR.
So the game's the same, the board's just getting bigger, and the stakes are higher.
That's about the size of it. And it leads to this big question the paper leaves us with. Are these patent wars just inevitable, like a side effect of new technology? Or is there a better way to innovate and compete?
Something to think about. Are we stuck with these lawsuits and everyone trying to one-up each other? Or can we do this a different way, a better way?
The paper doesn't really give an answer, and honestly, I don't have one either. But I do think that just understanding why this is happening, the strategies, the goals, it helps us talk about how to make innovation work for everyone.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about which company wins, it's about the future of technology.
Yeah.
And that's something that affects every single one of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to sign off for today. That was a lot to unpack, but hopefully you're walking away with a better understanding of how tech law and global strategy all get mashed up together.
And maybe you'll look at your phone a little differently now. All that drama going on behind every swipe and tap.
Right. Till next time, keep those brains buzzing. And if you ever find yourself staring at a research paper, wondering what it all means,
You know where to find us.
we'll dive deep so you don't have to.